clear.
Isco. From Isco! Superb reply from Real Madrid.
Edson Ronaldo. Oh yes! Oh yes! Would you doubt him? Would you doubt him? Cristiano.
De cabeza de nuevo para el Belda. Correcto Makelele en la recuperación. Perfecto Zidane sobre Figo. Figo Zidane. Entendimiento para Ronaldo. Esa es la carrera de Ronaldo que puede llegar. Se planta. Solo va a marcar Ronaldo. Va a marcar Ronnie. Gol, 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 gol.
Real Madrid, the kings of Europe. The club that has dominated generation after generation, from Di Stefano to Cristiano Ronaldo. From black and white legends to global icons. They've won it all over and over again. But here's the thing. When were they actually at their absolute best? Not just good, not just successful. I'm talking peak Real Madrid, the version that terrified every opponent, the version that felt untouchable. Well, let's talk about that. When you talk about football's greatest clubs, Real Madrid isn't just in the conversation, they are the conversation. Since the very beginning, they've set the standard. Whether it's the number of trophies, the quality of players, or the global aura, Real Madrid has always felt one step ahead of everyone else. They didn't wait decades to build their reputation. Right from the 1950s, they were already lifting European cups like it was a routine, and that set the tone for everything that came after. 15 Champions League titles. That's not just a record, it's a statement of identity. This club doesn't just chase silverware, they chase legacy. They built their brand not on marketing, not on hype, but on cold, relentless results. And it's not like they had just one golden generation and faded. No, they've been doing this for decades. The Di Stefano era, the Quinta del Buitre, the Galacticos, the Cristiano years, and even now, new stars like Bellingham, Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo are stepping in like they've been playing at this level for years. Real Madrid are always evolving, always adapting, always winning. Even in seasons when people think they're done, when critics say the squad looks too old or lacks depth, they go out and win the Champions League again and again. But with all this success, with all these eras of greatness, we have to ask the real question. Was there ever a single period that stood above the rest? A moment when Real Madrid wasn't just great, but untouchable. A time when they didn't just win, they owned the game. That's what we're here to figure out, and to do that, we need to go back to where it all started. The era most people still point to as the beginning of Madrid's greatness. The legendary team of Di Stefano and Puskas. The 1950s, the Di Stefano era, the legendary run where Real Madrid won 5 European Cups in a row from 1956 to 1960. It's the kind of record that almost feels untouchable. You look at the names, Alfredo Di Stefano, Ferenc Puskas, Paco Gento, and you're not just looking at some of the best players of that era, you're looking at players who helped define what elite football was at the time. They weren't just winning, they were winning big. In the 1960 European Cup final, they destroyed Eintracht Frankfurt 7-3, with Puskas scoring 4 and Di Stefano grabbing a hat-trick. Those two alone had an understanding that was years ahead of its time. Real Madrid played attacking football with flair, movement and purpose. For a club that was barely 50 years old, they had already created a model of dominance that other clubs hadn't even started dreaming of. But here's where we need to step back and look a little deeper. Because yes, those 5 consecutive European clubs were historic, no one's denying that. But was this Real Madrid team the best version of the club, or were they simply the first team to figure things out while everyone else was still catching up? Let's not forget that the European Cup was a brand new competition. It wasn't as structured or as deep in quality as the Champions League today. Many of the top clubs didn't even take it seriously at first. Some didn't send their strongest squads, others didn't participate at all in the early years, and the financial and tactical gap between Madrid and most other clubs at that time, massive. Madrid had the pull to bring in players like Di Stefano and Puskas, 2 of the most gifted footballers of their generation. But they weren't competing against super teams from England, Italy or Germany every single round like you see today. The level of competition was inconsistent, and in many cases they were simply miles ahead. Not necessarily because of tactical genius or squad depth, because no one else was ready yet. That doesn't take away from what they achieved. Those were pioneers. They laid the foundation for everything that came after. But when we talk about a club being in its prime, we have to ask, how much did the pressure, the difficulty and the level of opposition test them? And if we're being honest, Real Madrid of the 50s didn't face the same level of week-in, week-out resistance that later versions of the club had to overcome. They were dominant, yes, but in many ways they were dominant in a league of their own, literally. So while the Di Stefano era deserves full respect for what it did in shaping Real Madrid's legacy, I don't think it was their actual prime. It was more of a breakthrough period, a head start on the rest of the football world. Now, fast forward a few decades and you get to another era people love to bring up, the Galacticos. Figo, Zidane, Ronaldo, Beckham. It was the most star-studded version of Madrid we'd seen, maybe ever. Florentino Perez's vision was simple. Bring the biggest stars in world football to the same dressing room and the trophies will follow. And to some extent, they did. In 2002, Zidane scored that volley in the Champions League final against Bayer Leverkusen, one of the greatest goals in the history of the competition. That same year, they were crowned champions of Europe for the 9th time. They won La Liga in 2001. They dominated headlines. The Bernabeu was packed. Their matches were events. No one had ever seen a team with this much commercial and cultural weight. But here's the thing, when we're talking about a team being in their prime, it's not about fame. It's not about star power, it's about sustained dominance, over results, over performances, over pressure. And that's where the Galacticos fell short. Because of all the names and all the money, this team was not consistent. They were incredibly top-heavy. There was a point where they were prioritizing shirt sales and brand image over squad balance. When Makelele was sold, arguably the most important defensive player in that midfield, Florentino reportedly said he wasn't a header of the ball and he rarely passed the ball more than 3 meters. Younger players will arrive who will cause Makelele to be forgotten. But Real Madrid did miss him badly. After Beckham joined in 2003, things started to unravel. The midfield became too attacking. The team lacked grit. The balance was gone. Despite all the firepower, Madrid couldn't win La Liga again until 2007. They didn't win another Champions League until 2014. They weren't feared anymore. They were entertaining, yes, but beatable. Even in the Champions League after 2002, they never made it past the quarter-finals during the Galactico years. That's the brutal reality. So when we look back, the Galacticos were more of a marketing revolution than a footballing one. They were iconic, no doubt. They changed the way football clubs thought about image, sponsorship and global reach. But in terms of football alone, this wasn't Real Madrid in their prime. It was a spectacle, a dream team on paper, but not the most dominant version of Madrid we've ever seen. Now, if you want to talk about dominance, real dominance on the pitch and on the biggest stages, then you need to look at what happened between 2016 and 2018. 2016, the tactical transformation. By the time 2016 rolled around, Real Madrid were at a crossroads. They had world-class players, no doubt. Cristiano Ronaldo, Luka Modric, Sergio Ramos, Toni Kroos, Gareth Bale and Benzema. However, despite all that individual quality, they still lacked consistency. They'd gone 2 years without a major trophy, and internally there was tension. Carlo Ancelotti was gone, Rafa Benitez had been brought in but didn't last. The squad looked disjointed, and for all their potential, Real Madrid didn't look like a team ready to dominate Europe. Then came Zinedine Zidane. He wasn't an experienced manager. He didn't arrive with a stacked resume or years of tactical evolution behind him, but what he did have was trust. The players respected him, the club believed in him, and most importantly, he understood the dressing room. He knew how to simplify the chaos and bring balance back to a team that had been pulled in too many directions. And that's where the transformation started. Tactically, Zidane didn't overcomplicate things. He leaned into the team's strengths. He gave Kroos and Modric the freedom to dictate play. Casemiro, who had been underutilized before, became the anchor, providing the defensive cover that allowed the others to shine. The midfield finally had structure. It wasn't just about pressing forward anymore, it was about control. Then came Cristiano Ronaldo. This was the year his evolution began. He wasn't the winger who would beat 5 players and shoot from 30 yards anymore. Zidane moved him centrally more often. Ronaldo conserved his energy, picked his moments and focused on the one thing he was still the best at, scoring goals. And the results showed. Madrid went on a run in the Champions League that proved one thing. This team wasn't just talented, they were learning how to win ugly. They beat Roma, Wolfsburg, Manchester City, not the flashiest path, but they got the job done. And then came the final against Atletico Madrid. That final wasn't just about revenge, it was about reasserting dominance. Atletico had pushed them all the way again. The match went to penalties, and in the most high-pressure moment imaginable, Real Madrid didn't flinch. They won the shootout. Ramos scored. Ronaldo scored the final penalty. Zidane lifted the Champions League in his first season as a manager. And here's why this moment mattered so much. It wasn't just another Champions League, it was the beginning of something bigger. You could feel it. There was clarity in the squad now. Roles were defined, the team had balance, the egos were under control. Real Madrid weren't just hoping to win, they were building a machine designed to dominate Europe. And the scary part? They weren't even at full power yet. Because what came next would take this team from great to historic. 2017, the peak of all peaks. If 2016 was the transformation, then 2017 was the full realization of everything Real Madrid had been building toward. This wasn't just a great team anymore, this was the team, a side that could beat you in a tactical battle, break you on the counter, overwhelm you with possession, or grind out results when the night got ugly. This version of Madrid had depth, control, mentality, and experience, and in 2017, it all came together in terrifying fashion. Zidane didn't just stick to what worked, he perfected it. The midfield trio of Casemiro, Kroos, and Modric became the heart of the team. Each of them brought something unique. Kroos controlled the rhythm with his metronomic passing. Modric added creativity, vertical movement, and intelligence in tight spaces. And Casemiro? He cleaned everything up. He broke attacks, shielded the defense, and scored big goals when it mattered. Up front, Ronaldo continued his transformation. This was no longer the Ronaldo who wanted the ball at his feet 90 times a game. This was the ruthless version, the one who waited, picked his spots and finished. He scored 10 goals in the quarter-finals, semi-finals and final combined. Think about that, 10 goals in the most decisive phase of the Champions League. Madrid stormed through Europe that season. They beat Napoli, Bayern Munich, Atletico Madrid, and then, in the final, they met Juventus. That final was supposed to be close. Juventus had conceded just 3 goals the entire tournament. Buffon was in top form. Their defence, led by Chiellini and Bonucci, had shut out Europe's best, but Real Madrid tore them apart. They didn't just win the final, they dominated it 4-1. Casemiro scored, Ronaldo scored twice, Marc Asensio, just 21 at the time, sealed it late. It wasn't just a victory, it was a message to the rest of Europe. This is our era now. And if that wasn't enough, they also won La Liga that season. That's something people forget. This wasn't a one-trophy campaign. Madrid were dominant across the board. They finished ahead of Barcelona in the league with 93 points, scoring over 100 goals. They rotated when they needed to. Zidane used his full squad. Isco, Asensio, Morata, James Rodriguez, everyone contributed. They had solutions for every problem. If Bale wasn't fit, Isco came in and changed the dynamic. If they needed to go direct, Ronaldo and Benzema made the runs. If they needed to slow the game down, Kroos and Modric pulled the strings. This was the peak of Real Madrid, not just because of the trophies, but because of the control, the consistency, and the confidence. They had a spine, they had leadership, and they had a system that could beat you no matter what you threw at them. And the scary part? They weren't done yet. In 2018, Madrid would do what no one thought was possible. They'd win it again, for the 3rd time in a row. 2018, the end of an era. By the time the 2017-18 season began, Real Madrid were no longer trying to prove themselves. They were the benchmark. Back-to-back Champions League winners, La Liga champions, a squad filled with world-class players, managed by a coach who had found the perfect formula. But success at that level brings pressure. Everyone's watching, everyone's planning for you, and internally, it gets harder to keep the same intensity. Real Madrid felt that too. Their La Liga form started to dip. Barcelona ran away with the title that season. In the league, Madrid were inconsistent. They dropped points in matches they should have won. Bale was struggling with injuries. Benzema was out of form for long stretches. Even Ronaldo had a slow start by his standards. But here's what made this team different. When the Champions League knockout rounds came around, they switched on like a machine. They got drawn against Paris Saint-Germain in the round of 16. Neymar, Mbappe, Cavani. Everyone thought Madrid was done. People said they were too old, too tired, too slow, but Madrid outclassed PSG. Over 2 legs, they were smarter, more efficient, more experienced. Ronaldo scored 3 times. Madrid advanced. Then came Juventus in the quarter-finals. The same Juventus they destroyed the year before. The first leg? Madrid go to Turin and win 3-0. Ronaldo scored one of the greatest goals in Champions League history, a bicycle kick that left Buffon standing still. Even Juventus fans stood up and applauded. The second leg was tense. Juventus came back to make it 3-3 on aggregate, but in the dying moments Ronaldo stepped up again, converted a penalty under enormous pressure. Madrid survived. Next it was Bayern Munich in the semi-final. Another brutal test. Bayern dominated stretches of both legs, but Madrid absorbed it. Navas made huge saves. Ramos led from the back, and once again Madrid found just enough to get through. That's what this team had. They weren't always the better side over 90 minutes, but over 2 legs, with pressure on the line, they never cracked. Then came the final, Real Madrid versus Liverpool in Kiev. And that final? That was chaos. Salah got injured early, Ramos was involved, Karius made 2 massive mistakes. Bale scored one of the most outrageous goals in Champions League final history, a bicycle kick that was somehow even cleaner than Ronaldo's versus Juve. Ronaldo didn't score, but it didn't matter. Madrid won 3-1, champions of Europe again. 3 Champions Leagues in a row, 4 in 5 years. And no, this wasn't a fluke. This was a team that knew how to manage moments. They had been through the fire so many times that nothing fazed them. But here's the turning point. That was the last dance. Within weeks, everything started to change. Zidane stepped down, Ronaldo left for Juventus. The dynasty didn't collapse overnight, but the magic of that specific core, the mentality, the chemistry, the momentum faded. And while Real Madrid would win again in the future, that 2016 to 2018 window, that was the peak, the absolute prime. 3 years, 3 Champions League trophies, different types of challenges, different types of victories, but the same result, Madrid on top. Now the question is, after breaking down every era from the Di Stefano dynasty to the Galacticos to this three-peat under Zidane and Ronaldo, can we finally say without a doubt when Real Madrid was truly in their prime? But what do you think? When was Real Madrid in their prime? Well, let me know in the comments, and you can check out our last video on the big problem the Xabi Alonso team faces. Thank you.